Episode 49, Underwater Cave Explorer, Jill Heinerth. Welcome to The Art of Excellence, a show about people doing extraordinary things in their lives. I'm your host, Glenn Zweig. Thanks for joining me. My guest today is Jill Heinerth. Jill is a cave diver, underwater explorer, writer, photographer, and filmmaker. She has starred on TV series for PBS, National Geographic Channel, and the BBC, and has consulted on movies for directors including James Cameron. Her new book is titled Into the Planet: My Life as a Cave Diver. Jill, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thrilled to have you. Jill, it sounds like you're pretty fascinated with water at a really young age. Do you recall some of those early memories? Like, what did you find so alluring about it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, my very first memory was crawling off the dock at the cottage and floating face down, like looking down at ripples in the sand. And I remember it being beautiful until my mother's sneakers landed right in front of my eyes and ripped me back up out of the water.
You were under the water.
Yeah. From her vision, it was, the toddler is floating by face down by the dock.
My God. Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty scary.
Yeah, but I grew up in the water. I mean, every chance I had, I was swimming. Even though I grew up in Canada in cold water, we swam all the time.
So you seem to have this explorer gene in you, even as a kid, just wanting to push the boundaries and discover new things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all kids are explorers. We start by sort of tasting and testing everything in the world around us. And for a lot of kids, that kind of gets discouraged after a while, and you become more and more fearful of your surroundings. But for me, I just kept on exploring.
Like, are there examples that, in terms of just pushing the boundaries a little bit?
Even just walking to school, we had an option of going around the long way on the streets, on the sidewalk, or cut through the woods. I always cut through the woods, and some people would say, "Oh my God, that's dangerous," but I loved it. There was even a pond on a farmer's property on the way home, and one of my friends and I would occasionally swim that, which was amazing.
My God. Not to sort of bring you down here, but, you mentioned in the book that you were bullied by a lot of your classmates,
Mm-hmm.
which I imagine must have been pretty painful. So, like, have you carried that pain with you throughout your life? Does it fuel you in some way?
It's interesting. I'm sure a lot of kids get bullied. For me, I sort of never felt like I fit in until I was in university. Really, I was always sort of an outsider, and that was very, very difficult and painful. But I think that's part of the wisdom of the years. As you grow older, you care a lot less about what people think about you, and just are focused more on what you do with your own life. And maybe that made me more stubborn. Certainly, it made me work harder. For a long time, it made me try to seek acceptance. But I realize now it's like that's kind of crazy. Just do what you love.
What made you different? Why were they, picking on you?
I was really, really curious as a kid. I excelled academically, and I wanted to learn. I mean, I remember asking my mom, when can I start school? When can I start school? And then once I was in school, I would ask the teachers for extra work, give me something else. And other kids didn't really get that, I guess. And then I skipped a grade. And so I was just socially completely out of whack, wrong age for the class. And I never really sort of got beyond that until university.
Just to fast forward a little bit, you go on to college, and you had a really harrowing experience when you moved into your apartment as a student at York. My heart honestly skipped a couple beats just reading about it. Can you retell that story?
Yeah, I mean, I woke up in the middle of the night. The first night I was living in this house off campus, and I heard that someone downstairs, someone had broken into the house and was rifling through the kitchen and the rooms downstairs. And it went on for a long time while I tried to make noise in my bedroom to scare them off, but I didn't have a phone. I didn't have a way to, jump out a window or anything like that. And ultimately, I come face to face with this burglar who knew full well he was going to, have an encounter. I'd made enough noise to let him know I was there. And I had to fight for my life. I had to fight this guy off.
What do you mean you fought him? How did you fight him?
Well, I mean, he came busting into my room, and I had grabbed two X-Acto knives off the drafting table in my room, and I lunged at him with one of them and just swept it right diagonally across his chest. It was all I could do. My first reaction was just to want to hide under the covers. But, when step by step by step, someone forces you to that ultimate moment, you make a decision, do I want to live? Am I going to let this happen? And I fought. So that informed me a lot about how to deal with challenges in life. And it probably down the road later on, when I became an underwater cave explorer, it probably saved my life, having really had a close call, sort of this dance with fear and an understanding of how to prevail.
What's crazy is you actually experienced another break-in, I think that same year when you were with your parents.
Yeah.
But Jill, you handled it very differently that time around. It sounds like it was a crucible moment for you in some way.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, the first time around, I was looking for ways to hide. I was looking for ways to run if I could. And the second time around, it was like, nobody's going to do this to me twice. Nobody's going to destroy the sanctity of the home that I grew up in. And that second time, literally like charged down the stairs, yelling and screaming at whoever was in the house. And I probably sounded like some kind of crazed banshee or something.
Well, it's because we learn a lot about ourselves, right? In these heightened moments.
Yeah.
We always talk about the, fight or flight, and it sounds like you sort of, went right into fight mode now at this stage.
Yeah. And I think I felt like I had dissected the stages of fear, and I understood what happened the second time around. It's like, first, something startling happens, your heart races, you're breathing fast, like these chattering monkeys are exploding in your head, talking about a million things. And that moment, you have to take a deep breath and make a choice to like remove the emotions from the situation and just be prepared to live in these very small, pragmatic micro steps towards success, and in that space, breaking down the terror, breaking down the fear, it becomes easier and easier to deal with really big things, really big challenges.
We're going to come back to this theme of fear later
Yeah.
because it is a theme that's sort of recurring throughout these adventures you have.
Yeah.
But you ended up getting your act together pretty quickly following school. You started your own company, advertising agency, by your
Yeah.
mid-20s. And as successful as you were in terms of the business and financial success, making a name for yourself, something seemed to be missing.
Yeah.
And here's a quote from the book. Even though I was successful at work, I felt as if I was wearing clothes that didn't fit. I was drained and unfulfilled. A growing sense that my work lacked importance made me feel incomplete. That carefree child who lived for adventure had been cleaved from my adult self. So it sounds like a midlife crisis, and you're only in your mid-20s. Were you depressed? You just were really unsatisfied with what you were doing in life?
Well, yeah, I guess I just sort of felt swept up. I loved the creative process. So I loved the type of, intellectually, I loved the work, but I was claustrophobic being inside. I mean, I needed to find a way to have a career outside in the wild kind of thing. And I felt swept up in society's expectations, family expectations. Like everybody looked at me as a great success. But inside I'm going, no, this is not it. This is not what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And I chose to start over.
I recently interviewed Rich Karlgaard, who's the publisher of Forbes. He wrote a book
Mm-hmm.
called Late Bloomers. And the underlying premise is that as a society, we over obsess about this sort of need to have our whole life plan figured out. You know, the day we go to school, the day we finish school,
Right.
we over obsess about early achievement essentially. And there's no time to really explore ourselves and chase our curiosities. And it sort of sounds like you fell pretty much into that trap we all do, but had the wherewithal to catch yourself and step out of it.
Yeah, and I think that schools today still prepare kids in that way. It's like you're 10 years old and people are saying, "What do you want to be when you grow up, little girl?" And starting to, build that narrative. How many kids are you going to have, or or whatever. And then before you know it, it's like there's this master list of stuff you're supposed to do: go to school, achieve, get your degree, get married, have 2.8 children, buy your house. Oh, it's time to buy your house. Why haven't you bought your house yet? What's wrong with you? And then one day in the quiet of your own home, you go, what have I done? I've been swept up in this tidal wave of other people's expectations, but it's not what is going to give me passion. It's not what's going to make me whole. And then in that understanding, it becomes easier and easier to go, well, I can't do this. So what's next? I get to choose.
Well, you may not appreciate the power, the maturity, the wisdom of that move, because I think most people, and I'll throw myself into the mix. It's very hard to separate ourselves and our true innate needs and desires from society's expectations of us. So the fact that you could do that, kudos to you. That's very brave of you.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if it's brave or what it is. It's just we've got one life, right? And trying to design that around other people's expectations. Whether that's career, family, or even an issue like gender issues. Like, there's all kinds of people that don't feel comfortable in their own skin, and society is a whole lot more exciting, and innovation is enabled when people can find what makes them comfortable in their own skin.
Well, so you take this notion that something was missing and you essentially just quit your business cold turkey. Decided you had enough, moved to the Cayman Islands to embark upon this new scuba career. And let me underscore that, really a future career, because it's not like you had a career
No.
like that when you moved. So that's a pretty dramatic pivot, right? No job, no sense of what exactly is going to be your next way to earn income. Were you scared?
No, it was terrifying. Friends and family were horrified. They were like, "Oh my God, you have a perfectly great success and you're selling everything and just like leaving with a suitcase. What is your plan?" And I didn't have a plan. I thought, well, move to the islands. At least, I can teach scuba, and maybe in being in that environment, I'll be able to learn what it is to, be a better underwater photographer and see the way forward. I mean, there was no roadmap for making a career as an underwater explorer. And so I just started trying to meet and reach out to people so I could learn more about what that life was and what I needed to do to make it happen.
There's no book like,
There's no book.
careers for underwater explorers.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about, again, just to sort of fast forward the story, you start finding a way to earn a living, and then caving, captures your passion. And you say that underwater caves are alluring, challenging, and seductively dangerous. So, personally, I've gone scuba diving, but honestly, cave diving is completely foreign to me, as I'm sure it is for most of my audience.
Yeah.
So I'd love if you could try to take me virtually into a cave with you. Like, what do you
Sure.
see? What do you feel? What's going through your mind, through your body?
Yeah. I mean, some caves start in beautiful places like a crystal clear river, but other entrances to caves are muddy little ponds in the middle of the woods that you wouldn't know there was anything below. But like when I go caving in Abaco, for instance, we sort of walk down this depression in the ground that's sort of surrounded on one side by a limestone cliff, and we slip into this muddy little pool and finish putting our gear on, and then we slide down underwater through this murky water that doesn't seem very appealing until you hit about 30 or 40 feet deep, and then suddenly, boom, you break through this murky clay-filled water and you're into this crystal clear, air clear water, and hanging from the ceiling are these white crystalline stalactites, and coming up from the floor are these pillars of stalagmites, and it's like swimming through a crystal chandelier. It's really, really beautiful. Now, the environment is beautiful when you go in the first time, but your bubbles can strike the ceiling and silt can start to rain down on you. And you have to wind a thin nylon guideline through the cave with you so that if you lose the visibility, you can turn around, hang on to it, and swim all the way out without running through your fingers, because there's no light in these environments, only the light that we bring. And it's very, very easy to disturb the clay and destroy the visibility.
I think a lot of the work that you do as a cave diver is to survey caves, essentially creating an underwater cave map.
Yeah.
So forgive me for perhaps, asking the obvious, but why is that important? What do we do with that kind of information?
Well, when I'm swimming through an underwater cave, I'm literally swimming through the veins of Mother Earth. So I'm in the sustenance of the planet, that fresh water that serves you and me and wildlife and agriculture and industry. Everything that we do is served by clean, fresh drinking water. And when I'm in a cave, that's what I'm swimming in. So when we can do an accurate job mapping cave itself and its location in relation to surface features on top of the earth, then we have a much better chance of understanding where it is and how we protect it. But I also work with other scientists. I mean, these are virtual museums of natural history that contain information about Earth's past climate. They contain the remains of past civilizations that use caves as portals to the underworld, and they contain the bones of extinct animals. So there's a lot of different science that we do in these environments that teach us a lot about everything from evolution and survival to climate change.
It's almost like you're an underwater archaeologist.
At times, yeah. Sometimes I am working with archaeologists. I mean, we find the remains of Mayans in caves in Mexico, Lucayan Indians in the Bahamas, and caves all around the world are used as cultural repositories as well.
And the reason it's so dangerous is because what? Where is the human error here?
Well, when you're inside a cave in an overhead environment, you just can't, swim back up to the surface if something goes wrong. I could be miles inside the planet laterally, and if I have a catastrophic failure of my life support equipment, I have to swim that entire distance miles back out of the cave through, tunnels and channels and left turns and right turns to get back to the entrance again. So normal scuba divers, if something happens, they just swim straight to the surface and okay, it's, emergency's over, I have air to breathe. But for me, I have to solve everything underwater, and you can get lost, you can lose the visibility, you can lose track of the guideline, you can be squeezing through a small space and get yourself wedged. So there's a lot that can go wrong.
And just to set the stage of just how risky this is, more people have died exploring underwater caves, the very caves that you explore, than climbing Mount Everest. So why are you drawn to such risky endeavors? And I don't mean like break a bone risky. I mean, we're talking life or death risky. I mean, it's that important to you that you're willing to put your life on the line for it?
Yeah, I mean, every dive that I do, I have to assess, is it worth it? And I know you'll be surprised, but I think of myself as very risk averse. So,
Oh, it sounds like it.
yeah, I'm willing to take on challenges and do things that haven't been done before. But for me, it's the challenge is finding the way to do that as safely as possible, with the right amount of backup, the right team, the right gear. That's what's ultimately intriguing to me, but it has to be worth it. I mean, just as, an astronaut chooses to go on a moon mission that has a certain percentage of, failure associated with it, they feel it's worth it for the science and even the sheer exploration. Much in the same way, I assess every dive that I go do and decide that it's worth it.
You've had a number of friends die over the years in this sport, I would presume.
Mm-hmm.
It just comes with the territory. And that's never given you pause, never one iota of doubt about this pursuit.
Oh, sure. It gives me pause. It gives my husband panic every time somebody dies. Every time there's an accident, I rethink everything. How could it have happened to them? I mean, this past week, another, fellow woman cave diver who was a professional, she was a hyperbaric physician, just died. And, I thought the world of her. And of course, we sit down and we comb over, what we know about the accident and try and figure out, why it happened. And then, of course, try and separate ourselves from those situations. How can I avoid this,
And when you do these postmortems, try to reverse engineer the dive and see what happened, do you more often find that there was something perhaps faulty in their planning, or is there just some amount of randomness?
There's not a lot of randomness, actually. When we start analyzing accidents, we usually find that the root cause of everything that happened started way before the person got in the water. So it might be like if they're using an advanced form of life support equipment, what we call a rebreather, it might be that they never properly went through the whole safety checklist before they got in the water, or they did and had something wrong with their gear but chose to get in anyway, deciding that, well, I can deal with this. It's just a little failure. So usually we can track things backwards, and it's not generally something that's sort of like, boom, surprise underwater, because we're trained for those, right? And hopefully we get in the water trained and practiced to deal with those. But it was a choice, like someone who fails to run a continuous guideline, and then they have something else that happens in the cave, they get lost, and now they don't have that tactile reference to get them home.
You mentioned on one of the extended dives that you did, you had gotten a really bad case of the bends.
Yeah.
So for non-divers, could you explain what is the bends and what's the experience like? Because you can die from that, right? It's really, really serious.
Yeah, so the bends is also known as decompression illness, and the longer a diver goes down underwater, the deeper they go, the longer they're there, their body starts to absorb inert gases that aren't metabolized. So our body metabolizes oxygen as fuel, but anything else in the breathing mix just kind of gets stuffed away into our tissues under pressure, much in the same way there's gas bubbles dissolved into a bottle of soda pop. Now, as long as I stay down, that gas stays inside my body's tissues. But when I start to come up and the pressure is relieved with every foot that I get closer to the surface, there's less and less weight of water pressing down on my body. That gas wants to come out of my tissues. As long as I make really slow progress back to the surface, then I can slowly breathe off that gas. But if I come up too fast or too soon, or a number of other things that can happen, then those gas bubbles can come out of my tissues in the same way that if you shook up a bottle of pop and took the cap off, suddenly relieving the pressure. It would fizz and cause injuries, pain, and potentially even something as bad as paralysis or death.
So what does it feel like? When you came out too quickly, what was the physical pain?
For me, the first sensation was I felt like I had ants crawling around on the inside of my dry suit. But different people have different expressions, from pain, tingling, a rash, paralysis, difficulty breathing, neurological symptoms. So there's a lot of different symptoms for decompression sickness, because there's a lot of ways these bubbles can, express themselves in your system, in addition to the fact that they send off this sort of cascade of an immune response as your body tries to attack these bubbles and isolate them.
And so then you actually have to go to some kind of hyperbolic chamber, right? To pressurize yourself to replicate going back down to depth to remove all of this system. Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to somehow get rid of the inert gas. And so, first aid, we put someone on oxygen right away. And as soon as we can, we try and get them back under pressure in a recompression chamber, generally. So they're basically pressed back down and then slowly, slowly released over a course of about 6 hours of time. Yeah. And then sometimes they need multiple treatments too.
So just to continue on this theme of the
Yeah.
physical torture, cave diving can really take its toll physically on you. Not so much when something goes wrong like the bends, but just the exertion that you have when you're going through these caves. Can you talk about just the physicality of the sport?
Yeah, well, I mean, the worst part is actually unloading the car. Once you're in the water, everything's neutrally buoyant, right? But there are times when I might be carrying even as much as 600 pounds of equipment, swimming that through the cave. But I've designed all of the equipment so that it's all neutral and neither floats nor sinks, and then I can easily drag it along while I'm swimming. But carrying it, to and from the car, or when you're sump diving, which is going through a series of dry passages and then water-filled passages, you might be going up and down rope with gear. And, the extremist forms of sump diving means you might be going down 2 miles of rope before you get to the first dive site. So you
Wow.
got to carry your tanks and everything there with you.
So want to move from the physical to the mental part of this,
Hmm.
mental prep in particular, before you actually get into the water. So you mentioned that before each dive, you like to close your eyes and walk through all the worst case scenarios and rehearse all of the solutions. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So before I go on a dive, I ask myself two questions first. Am I capable of self rescue? And am I capable and willing to execute a buddy rescue? So, can I handle the worst case scenarios? And I have to say yes to both of those, or I shouldn't be in the water. And then I work through all the things that could possibly go wrong, and both mentally and manually. Like, okay, if this hose blows, I should reach back with my right hand, turn off that valve clockwise, and then be prepared to switch to manual control, check my PO2. So I literally walk through the steps so that they're very, very fresh in my mind. And then if something happens, I hear the boom. Oh, it's that hose. I just practiced this. I got it. Boom. And I am able to respond very quickly, kind of bypassing even the thought of fear and emotions coming
Well, that's
into
what I
it.
was going to ask. Is it more about creating muscle memory so you don't lose precious seconds? Or is it more just that you don't paralyze yourself with fear if something actually goes wrong, or both of those?
Yeah, it's really both. Yeah, the muscle memory, motor skills are so important. Like being current in our skills is so important, but also mentally ready to handle the challenge and with a very positive attitude, knowing that you're going to be successful.
Well, the most dramatic, pioneering, and perhaps dangerous dive that you did was diving the B-15 iceberg, the
Yeah.
largest iceberg in the world. It's literally larger than the entire island of Jamaica.
Yes.
So I'm not sure I understand what it means to dive an iceberg. Like, are there
Hmm.
crevasses in the middle of the ice and you sort of jump in? Do you approach it
Hmm.
from the outside? Like, how does it actually work?
Yeah, so this iceberg calved away from the Ross Ice Shelf in Antarctica, and we watched over a course of years of satellite images this crack get bigger and bigger and bigger. So in my brain, it's like a limestone cave, like a fissure crack, basically. And whenever it's warm enough for water to flow down that crack, it's going to make that crack bigger. And anywhere where there's a layer of softer snow rather than more compacted ice, that's going to be really easy for the water to preferentially open that up. And that's how limestone caves are formed. And so in my mind, I thought, wow, well, there's got to be the same sort of thing happening inside these icebergs. And let's go down and cave dive inside these cracks and crevices that are underwater. And so we pitched the project, but we didn't really know if we were going to find these caves, and we did. Our hypothesis was correct.
Hmm. Well, I think the water you mentioned was 1 degree from freezing.
Yeah.
I can't even start to imagine the kind of cold that feels like. Like, what do you wear for protection? And I assume even with all the layers you might wear in a dry suit, you're still with water that cold. You
Mhm.
got to be just freezing. What does it feel like?
Yeah, it's minus 1.8. And so when you first roll off like the Zodiac small boat, you're rolling into slush in essence. So you're kind of pushing larger chunks aside and descending down through the slurry until you're really in liquid water. And we're wearing dry suits. So we have like a neck seal and wrist seals. So we should stay dry inside that suit. It's like wearing a big bag. And then you've got a neoprene hood, so your head's actually wet. Your face is completely exposed to the water directly, but you're wearing gloves that kind of snap into the system and should keep your hands dry as well. But yeah, even with all of that on, it's very bulky, very difficult to bend and move, but you're still not warm.
You could get hypothermia pretty easily in that sort of.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You can only do so much. And there's only so much that your facial skin can take before, you feel like you can't even hold your mouthpiece in your mouth. It's just dead.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask the simple question of why. Why? Like, I think you said we pitched them. So in other words, no one forced you into this. It wasn't like a dare. You actually went to someone and said, I have an idea. Let's immerse
Mm,
ourselves in this
Slurpee.
frigid temperature. And we'll get to the danger in a moment. But what was the allure to you here? Why did you want to do this?
I really wanted to go to Antarctica, honestly. Like that's how it started. It was like, I really want to go to Antarctica. How are we going to go to Antarctica? And so our first thought was that, well, let's follow. Like I loved reading about Sir Ernest Shackleton and his expeditions, the early explorations of Antarctica, and that was only less than 100 years earlier. And I thought, wow, let's follow Shackleton's footsteps. Let's go to where his camp used to be and check it out in the context of this changing world. And
But Jill, you realize Shackleton didn't go cave diving in Antarctica. I mean,
no, I
you
know.
know that he
No,
was
no.
sort of above surface. I just wanted to.
Yeah. Well, and then I thought, we'll dive at the same time. And then as I'm writing the film treatment for this whole movie about Shackleton, boom, the B-15 iceberg happens. And to me, I'm like, holy crap, like this never happened. And, biggest moving object on our planet. That's exciting. And this is something I can write an exciting treatment about for a film. And because you're always looking for the hook. How am I going to get the funding to get there? I mean, it's expensive to go. And so that's how it happened. It was almost like luck. Climate change dropped itself right in front of my attention.
So I had asked you earlier to take me, into a cave with you, but a cave is a cave.
Mhm.
But this is the underwater world of an iceberg, which is worlds apart. So take me into that environment.
Well, my first cave dive in this cave called Ice Island Cave Number 4, we called it. I remember rolling off the Zodiac into this like slushy, and I couldn't focus. And I was actually a little bit concerned looking around for leopard seals because we'd seen some leopard seals, and they're quite ferocious. And I was a little bit concerned because this slurry is kind of making it impossible to see. And so I start to descend, and then suddenly, boom, it's clear, and I see this fracture leading into the iceberg, just a black knife edge cut into the iceberg. And then it was probably 15 feet wide. So I start swimming in this crack, and it looks like a golf ball's exterior, like with little ruts sort of carved by the hand of the sea. And I start descending, and it's getting darker, and I pop on my dive light and drop down through layers where I can see sort of foamy white layers, and then crystal clear layers, and then deep blue layers of what had been, years of snowpack on Antarctica piled up over time. And it was beautiful. And I remember seeing these little clear, transparent fish about the size of my thumb kind of flitting around, and they would disappear into little burrows into the ice. So it was beautiful. It was like an environment I had never seen right from the first doorway.
Mm. You had a couple really close calls. To clarify, by close calls, I literally mean you're precariously balancing, on the edge between life and death. What happened?
Well, I mean, the first sort of incident on that first dive, I heard lots of cracks and pops and groans from the ice because it's constantly changing. And underwater, sometimes you feel those like thuds and groans, like in the sternum of your chest, like it reverberates through your body. And we were hearing a lot of action like that. And when we turned around to come out of the iceberg, it turns out that a large piece had calved away in the doorway. Well, and it had actually blocked the entranceway that we had gone through. And I was like, whoa, the landscape's changed since we've been gone. I guess that's what some of those sounds were. And we had to sort of weave our way around the ice blocks. And
Wait, back up. You're coming back and the entrance had disappeared. Now,
yeah.
you talked earlier about the mental prep and sort of running through the scenarios. I'm guessing that was not one of the scenarios you had rehearsed.
No, it wasn't. But I have to be honest that I didn't even really understand the magnitude of it at the time. Like at first I thought, oh, there's a little bit of ice in the doorway. Oh, wow, it's it's actually blocked. But I guess I don't know whether it was because I could see the sunlight. I felt like I was so close. I just knew in my heart I was going to find a way around it. When I actually got to the safety stop where I was just kind of hanging underwater, we'd found our way around the blocks of ice and I was looking up. Like I could see the first mate from the boat and then my colleague Wes in the boat, and they were high-fiving and dancing and hugging. And I thought, what the heck? And so I didn't even realize like what had happened, because from their perspective, being in the boat, they'd seen this big, piece of ice just sheave away, and it created this big wave, nearly tumbled them out of the boat. And then they could see that our way was blocked. But I guess from my perspective, I missed the big event, and so I didn't realize really what had happened at that moment.
I mean, is it fair to say that, the entrance had closed off, another one appeared within reach from where you were? There's a fair amount of luck from that. I mean, there could have been no other openings, and that's the end.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah.
And that didn't stop you from jumping back in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And there was one other incident that happened.
Yeah. At the end of the trip, we were getting closer and closer to a full moon, and full moons generally tend to have greater tidal cycles, which net greater currents underwater and in the time that the tide changes from high tide to low tide. And we were inside the iceberg, three of us this time, when suddenly the current picked up like we had never seen it before, and it's just suddenly racing into the iceberg, wanting to flush us further in. And so we turned around to try and come out, and we were literally pinned down by that current. Like we've had to fight for our lives to get an inch forward and an inch forward and an inch forward towards the exit. It was quite scary. I mean, we turned a 1 hour dive into a 3 hour dive, which is a long dive in minus 1.8, Celsius, or 28 degree Fahrenheit.
When you say scary, was it ever scary to the extent of my life may end right here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I was like, well, I don't know if we're going to get out of this one. And that's where that fighter, kicked in again. It's like, I am not surrendering. Like, I will fight tooth and nail to the hairy end if whatever happens. And yeah, so that's where I think that those earlier experiences in life, better informed me to fight, not give up.
So it's not like you were sitting there thinking, maybe that advertising gig, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe there was something to that.
Yeah.
I asked you earlier, like the why, and
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
another interesting explanation you provided. So in trying to come to terms, with all of this, I guess I call it risk-seeking behavior. I realize you may call it risk avoidance, somehow, but let's be honest, you sort of walk, toward danger. You
Hmm.
learned about this 7R gene, which evidently you have. And it curtails the pleasure one receives from everyday activities. Can you share more about the gene and how it sort of just manifests with your general personality and your interests?
Well, yeah, about 15% of people have this gene, the 7R gene, and it's adventure seeking and novelty seeking. It's the people that you might know that are like always curious, always looking for the next challenge. Just as they figure out how to do something, they start at the ground zero again and tackle something else that's new. So perhaps like in our ancestors, these would have been the hunter gatherers out in the field, bringing back the food to the rest of society that has set up the farm and the home and provided that stability and comfort. So for me, there always has to be that next challenge. Like the moment that I'm back from an expedition, I'm figuring out what's next. What can I do now? What can I explore? And it's stepping into the darkness, as I say, like for me, literally into the darkness of an underwater cave. But there are lots of people that never cave dive that might have a similar, predisposition. They're always stepping into the next challenge.
Well, you're considered to be one of the best divers in the world. No question about it. So if you sort of take a step back and, look at yourself from the outside in, what makes Jill so exceptional as a diver? I mean, was it that how far you're willing to push the boundaries? Is it skill and technique? Help me dissect it.
I feel like when I'm underwater, I'm really in my element. So I'm more comfortable underwater than I am topside. It definitely feels like the place for me. I suppose much of the notoriety that I've had is probably related to the fact that I go to these places that nobody's been before, but I bring back the images and share the stories. And so there's other people that do what I do, but don't necessarily have that storytelling gene or interest, I guess. I'm still that little kid that did show and tell in kindergarten, bringing back these ideas and pictures to share.
Is this the kind of activity where eventually you age out of it? Like, is there a day that's going to come where you just can't really do it anymore?
No, I think there's always going to be adaptations and modifications to the way I do things, and maybe the extreme nature of what I do. But I have a friend who cave dived into his 80s, so hopefully I can follow in his footsteps or fin steps.
Well, you look back to that day you quit the company that you had built to go into the unknown and chase your curiosity, which you've done and you've clearly excelled at. So it's a really simple question here. Are you happy?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I pinch myself every day, the kind of career that I get to do. I'm doing what I love. I'm self-directed. I, have my own schedule. I'm never quite sure where the next paycheck comes from, but it's an entrepreneurial kind of spirit that I have to employ to do what I do. But I'm very happy.
The name of this podcast is The Art of Excellence. I always love to hear how my guests define excellence. So how do you define it?
Well, I think it's integrity, doing your very best at all times, trying to leave your campsite a little cleaner than when you found it. And a willingness to nurture and support the next generation, like your replacement. To me, that's excellence. So it's integrity and mentoring to ensure that if something's important to you, that the legacy continues and people below you eventually move beyond you.
I haven't heard that angle before, and I really like it. Well, if I could live vicariously through any guest I've had, I think I would choose choosing you and your career. And it really is absolutely fascinating. I couldn't put the book down. And thank you so much for being on my show. I really enjoyed this, Jill.
Oh, my pleasure. It's been a fun conversation.
Hey, thanks for listening. Okay, don't go yet, please. 2 favors. I ask simply 2 favors. One, if you could please download the iTunes app. You could do it on your phone. You can do it on the computer. Take 60 seconds and leave a review. It means a lot. 2, you can find my episodes on several social media sites: Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. Find the one that you like the most. Find the one where you tend to have a lot of friends and followers. And if you could please either share it in the case of Facebook and LinkedIn, or retweet it on Twitter, that would mean the world to me. So those are the 2 asks I have. I love putting together this podcast. I hope you enjoy listening to it. Thank you so much, and I will see you again next time. Bye-bye.